Nerds International proudly presents
Alfheim, the fourth realm of Earth, a world of fantasy adventure awaiting your imagination.
Warp Shell, a universe in ruin. Countless heroic tales waiting to be weaved through space and time.
Ghost Mountain, a place caught between heaven and hell, filled with fireside tales of the Wild West. These are the worlds of Index Card RPG, and this is a podcast about those worlds.
Welcome to the Threats, Treats, and Timers podcast, episode 4. I am one of your hosts, Gary, aka the Murder Hobo, and I am here, as always, with none other than Victor Diaz, the man, the myth, the legend.
Y'all ready for this?
And to his left, or possible right, is Frank the Tank, who does not stank. Unfortunately, Frank's not here to defend himself tonight because this episode is actually the second part of last week's two-part special where we talked about Core 2.0, and this week is the other half where we're going to discuss Alfheim Living Worlds. This was brought up on the Google Plus boards. It's quite interesting. I've heard it done many times, but I've never seen it actually come to fruition. So we thought we would run it by Hankerin while we had him here and gather his thoughts on it, seeing as how he's kind of the mechanical master of making RPGs and coming up with some ideas. And yeah, here you go. Enjoy.
Okay, everybody, this one's dedicated to the old country, where I used to sip on bourbon all day, slay goblins, and get some sweet loot. It's called Walking Through Alfheim. Come on. Walking through Alfheim, getting to know a wilder kind, looking for a purpose in a tavern side. I would meet you anywhere. Cold and Lagar meets the air. Tirolo Stanos, never looking behind. Yeah! Woo! Alfheim, everybody! Woo! Shit! Where's the whiskey?
I got some other questions here. I put up a little thing on the Google Plus, and some people were responding here. So I'm going to smash you with a couple of these questions while we're standing here.
Well, let's hit it, man.
All right, question number one. Let's do some short form. What is your favorite whiskey?
Tullamore Dew.
Tullamore Dew. That sounds like an adventure or a town.
It's like Irish moss that has been turned into alcohol.
Wow. Does not sound tasty. Irish moss. All right, Renegade 16 also asks, how would you run a kaiju game? Heroes versus Godzilla, for example. Does Godzilla get chunks?
Whew. Yes, absolutely. Godzilla would have like 3 chunks. He'd have like body, head, and spines. Or if you really wanted to be cool, also tail. And each chunk would be probably 20 HP. But those are vehicular HP. And then he would have like a 12 resist. So anything under 12 damage would just be ignored. So you'd have to find a way with vehicles to inflict in one attack, and not one round, because that's the difference, but in one attack more than 12, which in the way that my game math works would be very difficult. And then also he would be doing maybe something that would need to be invented, which would be like, planetary damage, So a building would be sort of 1 planetary hit point. So on his turn, he would do 1d12 planetary. Does that make sense? That's at least where I would start.
Yeah, there's no standing around for his retaliatory attacks. That's for sure. You want to make sure you got some solid cover. You're shooting bazookas from
fighter jets would be coming in, but each individual fighter jet wouldn't be able to really hurt him. Even like maser weapons wouldn't even really be able to hurt him. He would also regenerate maybe to full every 1d4 rounds. And so you'd have to find a way with a strike team, like little guys on foot with some kind of freaky like implosion weapon to suck him into a singularity or something. But I couldn't do that as the DM. I would have to leave that to the players.
Third question. How would you run a large battle? Calling in magical fire support, dragon strafing runs, and such.
Same way. I would basically lump your militaries into blobs. And if you want to call them squadrons, you could. The way that we ran it in Planet Killer is that we did the enemy fighters as each having 1 hit point. And so we would do a squadron as a 1 heart squadron. And really, mathematically, you're not doing anything different. It's just much more fun to talk about. So you'd have a squadron of troopers that run up. And instead of 1 warrior with 10 hit points, you're talking about 10 warriors each with 1. And so your dragon strafing would be 1d6 army damage, which is kind of like vehicular, right? And so as the dragon breathes across the squadrons, he's not hurting one guy for 1d6 hit points. He's destroying or incinerating 1d6 warriors in a squadron. And mathematically, it's exactly the same game, but it sure does make a cooler story.
Yeah, no kidding.
And then, the best answer is, well, let's go planetary. So actually, Godzilla does 1d6 squadrons when he enters the battle. And so all you do is move it up 1 level of magnitude. So, the battle goes on and on and on, and then Godzilla shows up, and he's now doing 1d6 squadrons per attack. And you're like, oh my God, there's only 20 squadrons left, So while you're trying to carve through the squadrons with your catapult fire, Godzilla can eat through them in 3 turns.
Breathe a little fire, wiping out like city streets sections at a time.
Yeah, especially if he gets mad, then he does like ultimate squadron damage. So he's doing, 1d6 and plus 1d12 squadrons when he breathes his lightning damage. And it's like, oh my God.
Wasn't the last Godzilla movie that just came out just all about Godzilla not being understood? It wasn't.
Holy crap. Man, did he lay waste. Crazy. You mean the one where they basically couldn't stop him? Is that the latest one?
I don't remember. Yeah, the last one that I saw, I think he was. Oh, of course, my kid just came downstairs. I'm gonna have to edit this out. I gotta put this. It is on block.
Oh, it's all good.
Oh, you should be interrupting or getting in the way. Something. Everything is where to go to. Okay, just 1 second.
No worries.
He just came down and I was like miming to him to text me. And then, so he does. And my phone is on block, but he's not blocked because he's my son. So I have my family unblocked. So it's like it went off anyway. And I thought I was trying to be all frickin' stealth and I just blew it. All right,
He's
I'll turn that.
Texting you, I need Cheerios.
He was texting me to see if his girlfriend could come over tomorrow. So anyways, it's all good.
That's a definite no.
So I'm pretty sure the last one that I saw, he was like they made him out to be this villain, but it turns out he was actually the good guy because he was going to attack like another kaiju thing.
Yeah, you're probably talking about the same one, which is called Shin Godzilla.
Something like that, yeah?
Yeah. Shin Godzilla is the newest one where he's been sort of radioactively overloaded, and in one scene, he just cuts Tokyo in half. It was amazing.
It was amazing.
So cool. And then they show the orbital satellite view, and his ray goes out into orbit and shit. Oh, it was so bad.
That was so awesome. Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check that out. He also wants to know if you're positive that you will never go back to Ironheart because it has replaced Star Realms as my group's go-to game, and he wants more.
The card game?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might do an expansion eventually, but I meant that as a labor of love, and I also play it with some friends, and we've been like trying to micro-tune the game. So we've removed some cards, and we have 2 sets, so we add a few cards, and I think it's the fun of that game is trying to game design it and balance it so you don't get too many heroes, you don't get too many monsters and stuff. And oh man, that is not my core skill, so I feel a little bit like an imitator when I'm working on a card game. So I don't know. If it sells more in the future, I might come back. But I just meant that as a little swan song. I never meant that as like showing the world that I'm capable. I mean, There are so many great card games out there. That's not an area that I'm really skilled at.
It's too late. It's too late, Hankerin. Everybody else has seen it and played it, and they want more.
Oh man, I tell you, it's worth playing 10 games of Ironheart just to get the off chance that you get to play the sort of the shepherd moment. So if you get like 18 sheep in one play and win the game that way, it's worth playing the game all the other times.
That's what everybody tries to do every game. It's ridiculous, and we love it.
Dan the Man 69 from Twitter. He asks, have you watched any Altered Carbon? Follow-up, what would you think about every system turret on a warp shell having its own unique AI personality?
Oh man, well yeah, I did finish that. It was a great show. Every game that I've played in so far that has been in space, including Harbinger from AbTab, as well as Stars Without Number, as well as we did some Rift stuff, as well as all the way back to Spelljammer. Everything we've ever played in that genre, we've always had an AI. It's just when we played Spelljammer, we had a Mind Flayer whose mind had been put into this sort of husk ship that we stole, and he was constantly trying to break free, but he also was the mind that controlled the ship, and so we had to sort of enslave him. But I think this is an essential component of every game. Now, do you need it in a rule? Do you need it to be written out? I'm not sure, because I think players' minds always go there. They go to a Farscape type place. And I don't know if you need to write it down. I think it's just, it's inherent in the genre that the ship talks to you and you tell it to shut up. It wants to talk to an AI. I mean, go all the way back to Cortana. He is weird because he loves Cortana. No one else wants to talk to her.
I'm pretty sure, I don't know if you've seen Dark Matter, but it's one of these space kind of deals too, where they just wake up on the ship and stuff. It's pretty good. But I'm pretty sure they're like the same thing. They just keep telling the AI to put a sock in it all the time.
You're not a person. Just quit talking. Just operate the life support, okay?
Gaming Ronin was the last one that responded with a question there. He says, has he thought about doing a set of hero and monster cards from a side view to get the 2D scroller view like Darker Dungeon cutouts, get some of that classic Final Fantasy look?
Oh man, well, I mean, I haven't fully supported the whole token concept. Actually, Matt Shaker is one of the first to make PNG cutouts of everything I did. But, I grew up on that. So I don't know if anybody noticed, but almost all of ICRPG is drawn from the side view. I mean, it's all drawn kind of from ground level. There's not a lot of composed art. It's all meant to be like game sprites. Maybe I just haven't quite gotten around to making the tokens that will completely sell that idea. But if you're curious about where my mind is, you can always go watch the Splinters of Iris game that we did, which is where I actually did a side-scroller world, and we played that world. And I didn't think we lost anything about what makes RPGs fun when you're in a side-scroller. It was still just as awesome. It's just that the verticality becomes much more interesting than with a top-down map. But as far as art goes, I mean, my brain, since I came up working on video games, my brain works in side view. So, yeah, I wish it had more perspective, but sorry, guys, I see everything from the side.
All right, well, that's it for the questions. So, one of the things and the reason that I reached out to you to talk about this stuff was because there's this post about the Alfheim living world, and there's been a couple of times. Yeah, and so fantasy writer Ed Greenwood, everybody knows him. He's been around for 30 years or more. He launched
Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, he launched a publishing group. I think it's called TEGG. TEGG, something along those lines. But he's inviting authors and creators to come in and do some stuff. And I think his premise, from what I recall, I could be wrong in this, but I'm pretty sure he's doing a living world as well. And last year we were talking with the Shinetar when it was coming up for Savage Worlds. I'm pretty sure there was some talk of a living worlds in that. So I'm familiar with the idea, but I've never seen it ever come to fruition. And seeing as how you've got this like super simple system that's very uncomplicated, I can see that it would be very easy to do. But my question would be, what is your idea for how the living worlds should roll out, how it should work, and how it should all come together? So just start with like, how do you think it's in your mind? What is the living world and how does it work?
Well, to me, there's two challenges to running a living world. The first one is the easy one, which is documentation. So as adventures happen, anytime that adventures happen in any game world, even Faerun, which is the most cemented world of them all, the world changes. You know, like in my version of Faerun, Lork has been burned to the ground, which is the little town up by the Sword Coast there. I know that's just one dumb little detail, but that little detail makes that world living. Because in the canon version, you know, Lork is just a little silver mining orc town. But in our version, we cast this sort of uncontrollable sun spell that burnt this huge crater in it and stuff. And, okay, so we just need to record that fact. And then the next group that plays in Faerun, they travel to Lork, and they discover a burnt out town with a huge crater in the middle. Okay, there you go. So that's the easy part to me about the living world, is documenting the results of people on a world that when other people play in it, they see those results. Okay, whatever. We have the internet now, and that seems really simple. The more interesting part of the West Marches style gameplay, and of, to me, what makes a world truly living, is that it isn't driven by what a dungeon master has prepared or wants to do. It's driven by what players want to do. And this is fascinating to me. And it's also, of course, a version of the sandbox that everyone fantasizes about. So for those of you who aren't familiar, the West Marches Charter is one of the most brilliant little pieces of RPG writing. That's where this concept comes from, which is, this is a guy who was running a game with multiple groups. And instead of trying to run them as a dungeon master, he basically put the burden on them. And so what they would do is say, hey, me and these other two guys, we want to go raid the Doom Vault. And they'd be like, what? What's that? And they're like, well, we read about this little place. It's, you know, over on the western coast of Alfheim, and we kind of saw it on the map, and we want to go raid the Doom Vault and see what's in there. And then the dungeon master says, okay, I'll get that ready. Come on over tomorrow night. That, to me, is the most fascinating part of the living world, is that players group on their own. So they say, hey, man, this week there's like 6 of us, and we're thinking, you know, these are pretty good characters. What we want to do is we want to go like explore the, you know, the hidden library under the pyramids in Coab, right? And the dungeon master is a responder, not an instigator. And to me, that is the most fundamentally fascinating thing about the West Marches living world, is that a group of players, which is more than any one party of players, they self-form into adventure parties and say, we want to X. And then there's a brief window where a dungeon master, or maybe one of a group of dungeon masters, says, ooh, I would like to run that. And he's the responder, and he runs, or she runs the game for them. I mean, of course, it's fascinating. It sounds fantastic. But I think everyone who's listening right now probably understands the challenge, which is that our hobby is such that dungeon masters tend to be instigators, and players tend to be, I don't mean it in a derisive way, but kind of like the audience. And I think as the hobby is beginning to evolve, because it's opening and growing, I think this is one of the most fundamental ways that our hobby could evolve tremendously, is for players to see that the game can be theirs, that they can instigate, that they can say, you know what I want to do? I want to go find my dad. And you know what? I heard a rumor that my dad is in Gilhelm, and he's this old fisherman. And anybody want to come with me and try to find this guy? Because I heard like a lot of people get shanked up there. And that mindset to me is a fundamental shift in what has been happening in this hobby since the beginning, which is that the dungeon master is the most enthusiastic person, the most creatively prolific, and they invite others to experience their content. I think it is a wonderful shift to think about players saying, I want to fight a dragon, and I'm going to find one. I heard there's one in this cave up in location X. And then the dungeon master is almost in the player's shoes, where he says, "Oh, okay. Well, I think I can have a handle on that. Let's get together tomorrow night." To me, that's the joy of the living world, and that's what I hope begins to occur. But obviously, Ed Greenwood would have tremendous success because his pool of people would be so vast. And this is where I hope that we can start to see some stickiness, is that our pool of people becomes big enough where someone can say, I read this part about Xenos and how it's actually like a spaceship that's sunken in the ocean. I want to go check that out because it sounds like Ulduar from Warcraft. Anybody else interested? And then other players gather, and then a dungeon master says, "Hey, I read that, and I've been thinking about some fun mechanics that could happen, and let's do it." To me, that's the essence of the living world. And then the easier part would be throwing it up on a forum, and then the next group that goes down there finds the evidence of the previous delvers.
To me, like the idea of the living worlds, I get that. And what you're saying, I get that. Now, you're under the impression that, to me, what I think would be the hardest part is the easy part, which is the logistics. Because it's going to take, I think, more than just a forum. That's an exceptional amount of reading. Like, let me just throw this out there. Let's say that you had a map. Like, if you could throw this up on a website. We come to icrpg.com. You've got the world of Alfheim. And anybody that's playing a game can put a pin on the map and saying, this is where my group is partying, and this is what we're doing. Now, have you ever done, or do you know what geotagging or geocaching is?
Absolutely. Now you're talking. That is an amazing idea.
So what if you took that and threw that into game, so that really all you have is a map, and everybody puts their, if you're playing a game, you put your push pin in, it pops up and says, okay, this is what we're doing here. We've come here, like you said, to look for so-and-so's dad. But you take the geocache idea where you take something and leave something, which is just like you've previously said. So we're going to go look for this guy's dad. And then while you're there, that group does their adventure and they come out with, write a short paragraph about what happened and then leave something for the next people. So-and-so fell down this cliff and we were unable to get his body, and he has this...
we don't know what happened, right?
Yeah, he could be, maybe he lived, or we don't know what happened. Maybe he dropped this staff of such and such, and we were unable to go get it. So that and like for me right now, my group that I'm playing with is in Nordheim. I gotta look up in the top. I'm doing we talked about this the last time that we talked, where we're going after the Lich Deceiver in the town of Nordheim. So my players are basically gonna take this guy out, but there is a good chance that I say out of my example, I could put in and say, like, we never found the cache, we never found his phylactery.
Right,
would be the perfect leave behind.
So we beat him, but he's still up there somewhere.
He's gonna eventually come back, and we don't know where he's gonna be. And that would be like I've taken something and I've taken a story seed and given a story seed back, so that there's always something to do there, so that people would know. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm having like.
I love the idea of pins, and then you can click each pin and get a blurb, and that's amazing to me. I'm going to put that on my board.
The rest of the world doesn't matter. Is what is the premise behind that, and this is coming from me being a lazy dungeon master. I don't have time to read all of this material. I wish that when people came out with their stuff, it would come out in audio format so I could listen to it at work. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want you to tell me all about this island and the places and the people and the things in your own words and your ideas. I don't have time to do it all. So if I'm only playing over here in in Nordheim, I can immediately just click on the pins around that area and say, oh, here's a seed. Here's a seed. And I can go there and...
We just took a caravan and we reached the Deadlands, and like, what goes on here? And there's a pin there of the last people that came through the Deadlands, and how 2 of them died and 1 of them like killed a frogman, and then this guy escaped, and Oh man, that's just fantastic.
Yeah, and then you're leaving something for that seed for the next person to come in and say, hey, we're in this area or whatever. Then I don't have to worry about what's happening at the Black Castle. Whatever happens
Hey,
there can happen there.
roast a marshmallow, then we can do that.
Yeah, you see what I'm saying? Because the logistics of having so many people playing so many games on one map, the only way to really, there's no way I could go through the forums and go through all that. That's kind of what I was sort of, so that was what I was thinking, because I don't know logistically how you would go about getting this. And I think that's why I haven't seen it anywhere before.
Well, I think also, I mean, let's face it, is a lot of what we do is contained in when we do it. And there is very little logistics that, in my mind, can ever change that. Is so much of what we do that makes us excited about what we do is contained in when we do it. And to tell someone, even your best friends, even you guys, even we talk on this podcast about all the details of what we do, but I really don't belabor you guys about what happened in my Kryfoth game on Thursday, because what we did is contained in what we did. And I think it's very hard for people, even with the very best games, to find an efficient way to contain it for others. And that is a big challenge. But you put a very interesting limit on it, Gary, which is, you say it's almost like your little pin on the map gets sort of a tweet. You get like 140 characters.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes it very interesting, because you're not trying to capture what happened. You're putting it into this geocache type format, which is like, hey man, you only get like a pop can worth of size to contain whatever you're trying to tell the world. And man, does that gets fascinating. And like, then to make it clickable based on location, and woo, I think you just had a moment, dude.
Thanks, pal. I might have had a few moments. I might not be sharing them all, but yeah, I just think that's a great idea.
On a squirrel's butt every once in a while.
Right? You know what I mean? That might be it. I'm spent. I've showered my love, my role playing expertise on everybody. I just like the idea of take something, give something, because here's the thing too. Like, when people come in and they read the ICRPG book, the core rules book, one of the first nuggets in your Alfheim book there was about this Lich Deceiver guy. Now, if I roll in and I take control with my partying group and I've destroyed that, and we want to do living worlds, or people want to come into living worlds, then what's that person going to do? Well, they can click and see what's happening over there, where the story has gone. And
you could have players who are the kings of Norberg. You could have 3 player kings.
Yeah, then reach out to me. I'll tell you who they are. Yeah. And then, maybe they get attacked or whatever, and I can set up something with my players where it's like, you're about to be, you've caught wind of this band of vile rogues that are going to, try and dethrone you, so to speak. And then I can hook up with them. And, I don't know, it's just an idea. But I find the living world idea fascinating in the idea, but just logistically, I think it's just going to be a serious punch of the balls that would, nothing has really happened with it right now. Like, I think everybody's sort of trying to flesh out the idea of what it's supposed to be. What do you want it to be? Like, was this was this your inspiration for a living world? Did somebody mention it to you? How did it all come about?
It was mainly the idea of Jason Scranton, who's been in my play group for quite a while. Just the inspiration of the idea of he just really wanted to run a free space Alfheim game, which is where players could wander freely. And then he kind of took that a step further, where he thought, hey, that'd be cool if people were wandering freely on a larger scale, and the results of what they were doing were cascading. But I think you hit a little bit of a wall, which is that a lot of times what we do can be very granular and very private, and it isn't necessarily fun to then document it for others. You're moving on to the next stage, and you don't necessarily want to tell everybody, yeah, the lizard men are dead up there. You can't, even though that's relatively simple, I don't think that it is a well-worn path in our hobby. The well-worn path is to spend time with friends, to improvise and twist little tidbits that you found intriguing, and then to have surprising things happen, and then to go dark and to rest until next game. And I don't think that the sort of the footsteps are well trodden, which are this habit of instigating what's going to be next based on the action of others. That is not a thing that I think is a common part of what we do. And I think that's the barrier to overcome. Now, I think the dividends are really cool, but the dividends are somewhat nuanced. What really will be different because of the living world? Well, some of the nuance of the how and the who and the why, but the actual sort of chewing of the food, so to speak, of the game will probably be very similar, which is like crawling tunnels or, fighting battles or facing existential dilemmas between friends. Those things won't change. And so I think for a lot of players, as well as dungeon masters, the living world only provides a nuanced switch in the story of the game. And I'm not sure that's enough to justify the work. And so as intriguing as it is to imagine like almost like a Grand Theft Auto RPG world, I'm not sure that the dividends are actually something that people are fascinated with. So let's say that you had the ultimate living world game that was totally happening, that was in full swing, and you as a player show up and you're playing into a city that was destroyed by other players and so on and so forth. But what really are you doing? What is really the meat and potatoes? Well, you're playing through a destroyed city. The fact that it was done by players, is that terribly compelling? Not necessarily. I mean, let's all face it. Characters and players in RPGs are terribly selfish. And that's a big part of the fun, is that they're selfish. So to work against that current, in some ways, I feel is really, working against some of the fundamentals of our hobby. Kind of like saying, hey, player, what do you want to do? I think in a lot of ways that works against some of the fundamental currents of our hobby, which is that the player likes to show up and have monsters jump out of the bushes. They're not necessarily used to saying, I want to go into the bushes, if that makes sense. So I think the living world is going to be very hard to do, even with a big audience. I think that the privacy and the smallness and the detail of our hobby is one of its most beautiful aspects. And to expect us as a community to reveal and document that for each other, as well as have it driven by players, to me, that's a tough challenge. It sure does make a cool concept to dream about, but I have yet to see it in full swing. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, no, I feel like we're completely on the same page. I've heard a couple of different people talk about it. I've never actually seen it come to fruition. And even let's say that it did come to fruition and it was up and running in the simplest format ever, map and pins. Yeah. Who's going to control the entire thing when it's all said and done? Like, somebody is going to have to spend an insane amount of time checking the pins, making sure that
what do they really get out of it? What do you truly earn? I'm not sure it's that cool. It's almost less than 2 beers.
Yeah. That's, like I say, I've heard it many a times, and I was just kind of curious to know sort of what your thoughts were on it, because I'm kind of the same sort of standpoint. Like, it would be a great idea if you could, the living world would be cool on maybe like a small 5 or 6 group kind of deal. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you have let's say you have 5 gaming groups, or you hook up in a circle of 5 friends. You go on the forums, you find a group that you want to play in, and they have their own little world. And so not so much is changing, and it doesn't require so much time. You still get the living world kind of a feel. But I'm just kind of glad to have you validate the idea that it is a lot of work for somebody to do for not a lot of reward. Because that's always sort of been the way I looked at it.
A dog bio break. Okay, I'll be right back.
Victor,
right, come on, guys.
You still kicking, Victor?
Yeah, still here, just enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, it's fascinating to talk to him, isn't it? Like, just to pick his brain about stuff.
Yeah, ask all the questions you never thought you would ever come up with until you have them in front of you, and you're like, oh wait. Yeah, it's good stuff. I agree with you on the map idea for living worlds. It's tough, right? Somebody needs to figure that out and figure out what we want to do. I mean, Google Plus is free and all, but having a central location, and then what's the bang for your buck there? How much time are we going to spend on it, and how much are we going to get out of it? I like the idea of having a smaller group, like 5, like a regional or a smaller set of locations or a smaller set of people that you have to share it with. That way it's a little bit less haphazard, more controlled. You can kind of get to the source material to the people who are writing this stuff to be able to get to it. Like it would make sense for me to manage my own Alfheim map with the 4 or 5 gaming groups that I game with on a regular basis, once a month or more often, and then just share those stories amongst them if and when they're all playing the same game. So like I could transfer this idea to a living world for Savage Rifts, and all the Savage Rifts games that I play, I can just use those and let the players drive those based off of the living world. But I would be the one who would be managing that as the GM and letting the players drive that content as it goes.
Well, I'm really thinking that you would kind of need to have a database of gaming groups, right? Like my gaming group is off in Alfheim doing their thing. Your gaming group is in an area doing their thing. And if people want to come and join in the living world, you limit it to, say, like 5 groups or 5 DMs that have an effect on this world. And this might be cool, too. So you're doing your thing in a certain area, I'm doing my thing in a certain area, and we've got like a couple other guys. Then you're only looking at 5 entries, possibly once a week, and seeing who's done what. Maybe somebody's left a cool seed, and you're going to go try and do that. But then... Here's where I think it might get cool. You take what we've done in our 5-party gaming world and compare it to what's happening in the other people's worlds just for shits and giggles on your own spare time. Oh, they didn't do this, they did it this way, or, they didn't do this.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that Brandon's back.
Yep.
There he is. I heard him. I thought I heard him roll in.
Dog's head pig.
So me and Victor were just talking side by side about it while you were out doing your thing. Here's another idea that I'm going to toss in your lap. This might be like another maybe genius stroke, or maybe it's just something for you to do. But what if you were in control of the living world and you put out an adventure and part of your Patreon page or something like that? Here's the adventure. Here's where it takes place. Give it out to your patrons or do whatever. But everybody has the idea that they have to come back and report their findings, and it's as simple as it's. And
you sort of consolidate it.
Yeah, so maybe some people killed the dragons, maybe some people released the dragons, maybe some people made a deal with the dragon. Whoever did the most of whatever, that becomes canon in the Alfheim world that you control because you're the creator of the story, right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Community campaign, sort of.
Use a smaller audience to be able to address all of the loose ends and all of the plot twists and
all
of
the
different items. You could actually do that in like a module. Well, I wouldn't say a module, but like if you took a large Photoshop print similar to the Alfheim map that you have now, cut it down into maybe different sections, or maybe just weave in one giant page, and you can use the prints. And you know how you can insert comments using the PDF comments when you're in Acrobat? You can do the same thing, and only patrons can get that locked down PDF, and you add to the PDF every month or however often as you feel fit. And we can, I really like the line that Gary was using where you give 1 seed and you take 1 seed. So, as a patron, I could submit a seed and I could take a seed and back and forth and use that as I needed to. And you can use the patron site as kind of a communication page to email back and forth. That way you only have 1 page, 1 document, and the community members are the ones that are contributing. And, you can make those 120, 280.
It's kind of like asking, is the Red Sword, which is this reptoid battleship,
right?
Does that exist in the world of Warp Shell?
Yes.
Because so many people have played that adventure, and not all of them crash it into the Dark Star.
No. Yeah, you're correct.
Some people just bail and they just let it float.
Yep.
So that would mean that Dark Star is now growing out there.
Right. Or they try to take over the Red Sword and they make it their own. Well, now you have 2 ships.
And then they let the Dark Star live and different results. And it's kind of like asking what's the outcome of that adventure, and then you would have a canon answer, which is a way to solve the entire logistic problem. Which is actually pretty damn awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be the easiest way for you to manage it, because then you could only, unless you get 14,000 people on as patrons, and then you've opened that box. That's a box you'll have to deal with when you get there. But
you've got 2 choices: 140 characters per DM or per response, we did this. This is what happened. Or it's a 5-point kind of conclusion thing. The red sword lives, the planet is destroyed. Do you know what I mean? Like
you almost close the book on a certain chapter and you have an outcome based on everybody that played. The outcome being that the Dark Star wasn't destroyed.
So you write a 1-page module or adventure. You have maybe 5 possible conclusions that would be acceptable. You release it to your patrons. They play the adventure, and then at the end of the month, before you, I don't know, you'll have to figure out the timing. But
I wouldn't
basically,
even think you need to limit it to the 5 different options of how it ended up.
Yeah, the outcomes have to be up to players. Yeah.
No, just totally leave it wide open to what the players do and what it ends up in, just as long as they're succinct in their reporting of it. Either, like you said, 5 bullet points, 100, 200 characters, and just, hey, the party of the Black Lantern destroyed the dragon, lost the fighter, and, saved the princess. And that's
Well, it's one of my favorite Facebook threads that I have, which is that there was a group who played Red Sword, and they just noped the fuck out.
Yeah.
right?
And the wave hit them from the Dark Star, and they realized that the Dark Star was growing in power and becoming unstable, and they didn't give a shit. So they they got the warp shell, and they spent their whole time like overriding the controls of the warp shell to just nope the hell out of there.
They're like, nope, we're not hanging out. You guys go right ahead and take care of that.
Like, fuck this whole situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my idea with the 5 points would be more along the lines of what you guys just said. Leave it up to the players, but does their resolution fit one of the 5 possible outcomes?
Right. Outcomes. Right.
They aren't the outcomes, but do you know what I'm saying? So these guys, they just work. You put that as one of your options. Maybe option C was just left, still floating in space.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what we did. Took the warp shell as your own ship, or not the warp shell, the red sword as your own ship. As an option, right? Destroyed the sun as an option, and then just let the people play the adventure, but their resolution is most similar to destroyed the sun.
Oh man, I love it.
And then you don't have to read.
Simplified way
Yeah.
to focus everybody's efforts.
You won't have to read everything. They can play the adventure. They can come to their own resolution. And if their resolution fits one of the 5 or 6 or 10 possible outcomes, then they just click a button and say, this is most likely or most what happened to ours. And then you're basically just running a poll, and then the highest score becomes canon in the world.
Right. So it's kind of like the mainframe of my brain becomes the living world, and the players and DMs only really have to do one thing, which is play whatever is canon.
Yeah,
Play whatever they read. Yeah, play whatever they want to play.
Oh man, that's pretty dang good, Gary. Pretty dang good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've been discussing this for probably like the better part of a year. I think April last year when it came out in Shinetar. Gail Reich, she's from Savage Mojo. She was on the Wild Eye. And she had brought it up, and it's just this kind of thing, like it is so cool, but at the same time so logistically almost impossible to bring everybody together that it fascinates me, and I would love to see it come to some kind of cool resolution where. And so I've been thinking about it I've got a lot of time to put into the living world. When I saw it pop up, I'm like, I wonder. And then here's the thing: I saw it pop up, and I've seen your system, and like I've said before, it's D&D with the crud scraped off. And I'm just like, okay, let's see how Hankerin deals with this idea of living world. Maybe he's got some kind of ingenious idea to scrape all the crud off that would be, the tar and the wheel slowing the horse and buggy down kind of a thing. Maybe there's...
No, I think you just put it into words. So I think what we'll do is let's start with a Red Sword poll on Patreon. And let's see what happened. Let's actually get math on what happened, because I know that hundreds of people have run Red Sword. So does everybody do everything? No, not at all. But there was something really strange about Red Sword where it really captured everybody's imagination. So that is, and you know me, I really don't believe in designing or conceiving massive systems and concepts so much as finishing the next step. I really love doing the next step, and it's how I recommend and coach people to be dungeon masters, is like, just do the next night. Don't think about a year of gameplay because there's no such thing. But what's next? And I think I owe you one because I think you just visualized what's next, which is like, let's just see what the outcome of one thing was.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's process.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's package and process. And then let's see if that sticks and go from there rather than saying, man, can I solve the problem of, human knowledge?
Sure.
No, actually you can't because even Archimedes got stabbed. So.
All right. Take it out on a down note there with a straight up old school stabbing.
Oh, well, he went out with style.
I think that you should throw this in the lap of Jason Scranton, seeing as how he's the jackass that came up with this big pile of work.
Let him do it.
Jason, put the spaghetti on your pants.
Yeah, he's got kids, doesn't he? He's the guy. I don't think he was the dungeon master. No, he wasn't. He wasn't the DM of Aliens, but he was a player. And I kept hearing him have to. He's like, "Oh, my kids are crying," and he's got the deeper voice. That's Jason, correct?
I think you're talking about Matt. Yeah.
Matt Shaker? Yeah.
Okay. Somebody had to keep.
I'm using that.
You just throw it in the lap of the guy that created the Living Worlds dilemma that you're going to have to.
He's not going to have kids anymore. He's not going to have time.
Aces Wilds in Aliens, who actually just never really piloted anything.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that, as cool as the Living Worlds is, until we see something actually or flesh something out with it, we're just going to put a pin in it and just sort of leave it there. Maybe throw this poll up and see what happens. And here's the kind of cool part about it, too. Now that you throw this poll up and say, okay, here's Last Flight of the Red Sword. What did you guys do in your gaming groups? Leave us a response. Throw up your however many pins or whatever. Maybe this is food for Hankerin's creative brain. And this just gives you the okay, well, if they did this, let's write the next adventure. And it's, Red Sword Part 2. Maybe do the same thing.
Maybe that Dark Star wanted a way to transport itself, and it kind of gets inside the Red Sword like Event Horizon.
Yeah,
and the Red Sword becomes this kind of scourge that so many cool sci-fi universes have, which is this ship, this ghost ship that because not enough players destroyed it, they didn't make the hard decision, and so in the canon, the Red Sword is now this ship which is sort of possessed by the Dark Star and stuff, and ooh, but if almost everybody destroyed it, okay, then we have a little bit different story on our hands, which is maybe the Dark Stars communicate with each other and they're angered by that or something. I don't know. Maybe Nibiru gets grumpy. I don't know. So he's the Dark Star who has warp capability, so he can travel around.
That's awesome.
He's
where does the Norse mythology stuff come from? Like all of your tattoos. And you're always you did the Rainbow Bridge thing from Thor the other day on your video, which was awesome. Yeah, but is that just a love of Norse mythology, or? Oh,
absolutely. I mean, it's not something that I talk about that much because it's sort of part of my private life. But I'm not sure how to put it in gentle terms. But I'm totally a pagan. I mean, I'm a worshiper and prayer to of many gods, not one. And the Norse mythology has been a part of my life since I can remember as a kid. So the older I get, the more, I don't know if real is the right word, but the more daily it becomes for me. And when something like that is a part of your daily life, it does have a sort of a comical reality to it. It's it's kind of like saying, by for Odin's glory or by the grace of Odin, right? At first, it's just kind of a cool thing to say because you kind of, Odin's kind of cool. But if you say that for 20, 30, 40 years, it's not being silly or cartoony, or it's not Norse mythology. It's that's kind of your name for the supernatural force in your life. And I think I'm kind of at that point. So I'm at the point where it's a little bit of a joke to me. To other people, it might seem, odd or whatever, trendy in some ways. But I don't know. That's just sort of, that's a part of my life I don't talk about that much because it's sort of private in a way. It's kind of like saying, hey, I saw Jesus in one of your videos.
I think it's more along the lines of, hey, are you circumcised or not? Yes.
We can't stop them. We've tried.
That's
in my
fantastic.
family, we just have this dull rock. Oh my gosh!
I'm just imagining you imagine circumcision by dull rock. Seriously?
It's a tool both to fight and to build.
Fantastic. Is there anything that you want to bring up as a topic, maybe in a couple of weeks or something like that you think needs to be brought out, or that you have an interest in chatting about?
Yeah, what I would really love to do is talk with you two guys in particular about something that was sort of straight to table. Like, I would love to do a content talk with you guys. So maybe a fun one would be something like a sort of a gothic idea, like where we could go from concept and then run through some of it, just a brainstorming, and try to conclude it in a podcast. So like the gothic idea would just be an example, but we would say, okay, how could we start this? And, Victor might say, ooh, well, there's like, guys coming in, and then there's like a weird, creepy undead dude who shows up in a wagon to escort you to the manor.
Sure.
And then me and Gary go, ooh, I like that idea. So the guy in the wagon, he has no face, or maybe his face changes, and then like, oh, these wolves run by, and there's an encounter.
I literally 3 days ago last week, I spoke to the writer of the game called Fragged Empire. He just had a Kickstarter. Yeah, he just had a Kickstarter that recently, is started putting out his products, and he wrote the Fragged Eternum rule book. Yeah. It's kind of based off of the Dark Souls video game. It's totally based off the Dark Souls video game. Anyways, he just gave me permission to go ahead and use that IP to be able to write the ICRPG world primer for Fragged Eternum, and it's totally dark gothic. Devils and the Celestials, and being stuck in the middle of hell, and on a planet that's all just gothic cities and layers of old buildings built upon itself. That would be a great game we could talk about and build off of. Just a thought. I mean, but the timing would be excellent for that.
Yeah, I think it would just be fun to have three creative weirdos who are just basically almost like journaling together in a live environment, to where we're basically saying, here's the creative process to design the stuff, the actual
Build a World
stuff.
101. Yeah,
and it's like, okay, well, what's the premise? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, then there's this encounter, blah, blah, blah. And then like, ooh, wait, we get to the castle, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, wait a minute, guys, I want to put a trap in there. Okay, blah, blah, blah. And then, wait, big guy. Okay, well, maybe what can we do to make the big guy fun? Blah, blah, blah.
Totally build in. Yeah, you totally build in your threats and timers, your log, your monster building. Sure.
Because we talk theory so much. I would really love to talk content.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
What do you think, Gary?
No, I'm in. I have numerous ideas. I will tell you up front that most of my stuff is very childish and immature.
That was a warning, Hankerin. That was a warning. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Nerds International Virtual Convention, March 10th to the 11th. If you want to play online with some of the nerds, here's your chance. Numerous games run in Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, and even Tabletop Simulator. Yeah, that's right. Experience some solid immersion as we go all 3D up in your business. I will be running an extremely ridiculous Western setting in my homebrew world of Gartar. Reports are coming in of a never-before-seen evil rampaging the lands and laying waste to local towns. If you're interested in playing, you can sign up for these games and get full information at nerdsinternationalvirtualcon.wordpress.com, link in the show notes. All right, Victor, take it away with a song and a dance, mister.
Here we go. Here comes the song and dance. Ladies and gentlemen, you can reach us at murderhoboshow@gmail.com or in the subject line if you put ICRPG. You can also get us on Twitter if you can keep it under 280 characters, because that's right. Twitter's moved up and they've doubled the amount of characters you can post. So once again, you can reach us on Twitter at Murder Hobo Show, or of course over at the Google Plus page, Murder Hobo Show, under the Nerds International banner. You can reach out to myself directly on the Google Plus Savage Rifts page. You're always going to find me there. You guys know me. You guys can talk to me over on the Google Plus page for ICRPG as well. Always very active and alive. So make sure you guys drop us a note and let us know what you think.
The Murder Hobo Show is not affiliated with or endorsed by any companies mentioned on this show. Any of the products mentioned on our show or appear on our website are the property and copyright of their respected owners. All items are used under fair use and education or review purposes. All other items are the intellectual property of the Murder Hobo Show, copyright 2018, all rights reserved.